On April 22, 2024, at 9:30 in the morning, the quiet street of Check Hall Road in Yukon, Oklahoma trembled from the sound of police sirens. A few minutes earlier, the 911 dispatcher received a call from a 10-year-old boy who reported finding his entire family dead. The police officers who arrived at the scene discovered a true massacre. In the Candy family home lay the bodies of 5 people: 39-year-old Lindsay Candy, her sons, 18-year-old Dylan, 14-year-old Ethan, 12-year-old Lucas, and their 42-year-old father Jonathan Candy. Everyone except Jonathan died from gunshot wounds. Jonathan himself died by suicide, shooting himself in the head. For the neighbors and acquaintances, the Candy family was the embodiment of the American dream. Jonathan met Lindsay Terry when she was a young chorister in the church choir. He graduated from Bishop McGuinness Catholic School. She grew up in Prague, Oklahoma. Their marriage seemed like the perfect match. The jovial, witty Jonathan and the cheerful Lindsay created the family many dream of. Their Facebook page was filled with ordinary family photos: kids with ice cream-smeared faces, family picnics, sports competitions, home construction projects. Jonathan worked part-time at the Paycom Center, a large arena where concerts and sporting events were held. He often worked at the home games of the Oklahoma City Thunder team. Lindsay was actively involved in the kids' school life, organizing events and assisting teachers. Neighbors described them as a friendly family, always ready to help. According to one of the neighbors, 68-year-old Michael Burcham, Jonathan loved to socialize and help with various tasks around the neighborhood. In 2022, the couple even appeared in an episode of the program Discovering Oklahoma, talking about their favorite bakery in Yukon. In the video, they looked happy and carefree. Jonathan joked about breakfasts, and Lindsay shared her love for carrot cake. In all the years of living together, the police never once went to their address, neither because of family conflicts nor because of neighborly disputes. Nothing foreshadowed the looming tragedy. The Candy kids were a particular source of pride for their parents. The eldest son, Dylan, had just graduated from Mustang High School in May 2023. He had a special talent for music and played drums in the university orchestra at Oklahoma Baptist University, where he was a freshman. The university orchestra director, Brian Stackhouse, recalled how Dylan couldn't sit still with joy when he found out about his first orchestra solo. 14-year-old Ethan was in 9th grade at Mustang North Middle School and was a promising baseball player. His coach, T.J. Armstrong, called the boy "Sweet Candy" and noted his natural talent and extraordinary energy on the field. Ethan was the best friend of the coach's son, and they often spent time together after practice. 12-year-old Lucas, a student at Meadowbrook Intermediate, was an active child who loved sports and outdoor games. He was often seen at his older brother's practices, where he played with other children. The youngest, 10-year-old son, whose name is not disclosed for ethical reasons, was an ordinary cheerful boy. The family lived in a cozy house on a quiet street where everyone knew each other. Neighbors recall how the children often played in the yard, and Jonathan always found time to help with any household chores. He could mow the neighbor's lawn or help with repairs, never refusing to help. However, behind this perfect facade hid problems that later led to the tragedy. Financial documents found later by investigators indicated significant family debts. Unpaid medical bills, bank loans, and overdue credit cards created constant pressure. Working only part-time, Jonathan could hardly provide an adequate standard of living for a large family. However, none of those around noticed signs of serious problems. Jonathan continued to joke and create a cheerful atmosphere at work at the Paycom Center. Lindsay remained active in the kids' school life. The boys were doing well in school and engaged in their favorite activities. From the outside, everything looked quite normal. According to relatives, disagreements between Jonathan and Lindsay about finances became more frequent. Lindsay expressed concern about the family's future due to growing debts, while Jonathan felt he was losing control of the situation. In his diary, found later by investigators, he wrote about feelings of his own inadequacy to be the person his family needed. On the evening of April 21st, a few hours before the tragedy, Jonathan was working at the playoff game between the Oklahoma City Thunder and the New Orleans Pelicans. Colleagues recalled that he was in his usual mood, joking and talking to everyone. Nothing indicated that this would be his last working day. After returning home, according to investigators, a serious argument occurred between the couple. The details of this conversation will remain forever unknown, but it could have been the last straw. Forensic psychologist Dr. Joni Johnston, who analyzed the case, suggests that Jonathan may have been in a state of acute psychological crisis when a person loses the ability to think rationally. The exact timeline of events that night is difficult to establish. The only witness, the 10-year-old boy, was sleeping in his room with a fan turned on. He only remembers a short sound of the fire alarm at night, after which he fell asleep again. The noise of the fan drowned out all other sounds. Investigators found that 2 bodies were on the upper floor of the house, 2 on the lower floor. No signs of a struggle were found at the crime scene, which may indicate the suddenness of the attack or that the victims were taken by surprise. The weapon was found next to Jonathan's body. The decision of Jonathan to spare the youngest son remains particularly puzzling. Dr. Johnston notes that such cases are extremely rare. Usually in family murders, the perpetrator either kills all family members or touches no one. Perhaps at the last moment, parental feelings prevailed, or there was another unknown reason. According to investigators who arrived at the crime scene, the bodies were found in different parts of the house, which may indicate that Jonathan methodically moved from one victim to another. This is confirmed by the absence of signs of struggle. Probably, family members were caught by surprise during sleep. The investigation also revealed other alarming details. In Jonathan's personal diary, found in his desk at work, progressive depression could be traced. The entries of recent months were becoming increasingly gloomy. He wrote about feelings of his own inadequacy, about not meeting expectations as a father and husband. Financial problems and fear of the future were mentioned especially often. Forensic psychologist Dr. Joni Johnston, analyzing the diary, noted classic signs of hidden depression in men. Men often mask their emotional problems behind jokes and showy cheerfulness, she explains. In Jonathan's case, his reputation as the life of the party could have been a way to hide deep inner experiences. Jonathan's colleagues from the Paycom Center recalled that he always created a cheerful atmosphere at work. He constantly joked, tried to lift the mood of others, one of the employees said. I never saw him angry or irritated. Nothing indicated that he was capable of such a terrible act. However, the family's financial documents told a different story. Numerous unpaid bills, overdue credit card payments, and medical debts were found. Working only part-time at the arena, Jonathan could hardly provide sufficient income for a family of 6. Lindsay, who was engaged in housekeeping and childcare, did not have a regular job. Neighbors recalled that they had recently noticed certain changes in the behavior of the couple. They still seemed like a friendly couple, but something was off, neighbor Rhonda Armstrong said. Lindsay started smiling less, and Jonathan, although he continued to joke, looked somehow tense. The evening of April 21st was particularly important for the investigation. After working at the basketball game, Jonathan returned home and, according to relatives, a serious argument occurred between him and Lindsay. The details of this conversation are unknown, but it could have been the catalyst for the subsequent events. The tragedy unfolded in the quiet of the night. According to the investigation, the first shots rang out after midnight. The location of the bodies and ballistic examination allowed partial reconstruction of the sequence of events. Lindsay became the first victim. Her body was found in the bedroom on the first floor. Then Jonathan went upstairs, where he shot the older sons, Dylan and Ethan. Lucas probably woke up from the sounds of gunshots and tried to hide, but his father found him on the first floor. The youngest son was sleeping in his room with a fan turned on. This simple household appliance, creating white noise, possibly saved his life by drowning out the sounds of the tragedy. The only sound the boy remembered from that night was a short fire alarm signal, possibly triggered by gunpowder smoke. After killing the family members, Jonathan Candy wrote a short note, found later by investigators, next to his body. The contents of the note are not disclosed for ethical reasons, but, according to detectives, it contained an apology and an explanation of his actions related to feelings of hopelessness and inability to provide for the family. At 9:30 a.m., the 10-year-old boy woke up and, leaving his room, discovered a terrible scene. Showing composure unusual for his age, he called 911. The dispatcher later noted the child's extraordinary collectedness during the conversation, despite the shocking circumstances. The first police officers who arrived at the scene found the boy on the porch of the house. He was in a state of shock but was able to clearly answer questions. The officers immediately called for backup and medics, although it was obvious that no one would need help anymore, except for the child. Detectives, examining the crime scene, noted the neatness of the house. There were no signs of disorder or struggle anywhere, which is characteristic of sudden outbursts of violence. This led investigators to believe that the actions were premeditated. However, further investigation did not reveal evidence of long-term planning. Jonathan did not buy the weapon specifically for this, did not make detailed plans, did not leave extensive explanations of his intentions. Neighbors began to gather near the house, hearing the sirens of police cars. News of the tragedy quickly spread through the quiet street. Michael Burcham, a 68-year-old neighbor, could not believe what had happened. "I saw Jonathan literally yesterday. He was helping me with the lawnmower," he told the police. He was his usual self, joking, smiling. How could this happen? Brian Graham, another neighbor, recalled Jonathan as a reliable person, always ready to help. He could fix anything, always responded to requests for help. "It's just impossible to believe that such a person is capable of something like this," he shared with reporters who began to arrive at the scene. By noon, the area was filled with police cars, ambulances, and news service vans. The boy was taken by relatives who arrived immediately after learning about the tragedy. The police organized a press conference where they announced the first official details of the event. The community's reaction to the tragedy was immediate. Dylan's friends from the Oklahoma Baptist University Orchestra organized a memorial service where they displayed his dress uniform and favorite drum. Orchestra director Brian Stackhouse recalled how the young man could not contain his joy when he received his first solo. He just glowed with happiness. Dylan was a talented musician and a wonderful person. At Mustang North Middle School, where Ethan studied, Coach T.J. Armstrong gathered the team to report the death of their teammate. "Ethan was the heart of our team," the coach said, barely holding back tears. His energy and optimism inspired everyone around him. Ethan's friends, including the coach's son, decided to install a memorial bench on the baseball field in honor of their friend. Students at Meadowbrook Intermediate, where Lucas studied, created a wall of memory filled with photographs, drawings, and memories of the 12-year-old boy. His teachers remembered him as an active, cheerful student who was always ready to help others. Meanwhile, investigators continued to gather information about the family's last days. It turned out that Jonathan had recently tried to find an additional job, but without success. Financial documents showed growing debts for utilities and credit cards. His phone contained search queries about bankruptcy and debts. Friends of the family created a GoFundMe page to support the surviving boy. The fundraising goal was set at $100,000, and in the first days, more than $61,000 was raised. The boy's uncle, Brett Remorowski, expressed gratitude for the support, but noted, "All these expressions of attention make me wonder what will happen when the attention fades and only reality remains." Psychologists involved in working with the boy emphasized the importance of long-term support. "Trauma of this magnitude requires years of therapy and constant support," explained Dr. Joni Johnston. "It is important not only to help cope with the loss but also to understand what happened as he grows up." The investigation revealed that Jonathan suffered from a hidden form of depression, which is especially common among men. Instead of directly expressing sadness, they often masked their condition with showy cheerfulness and jokes. His constant jokes and desire to cheer others up could have been a way to hide his own problems. Cammie Cruz, Lindsay's childhood friend, shared memories of their school years. She told a story about how she and Lindsay once fell asleep in a treehouse, causing panic among parents, who even called the police. Lindsay always brought joy to any conversation, Cruz recalled. She was an extremely loving mother and wife. Jonathan's colleagues from the Paycom Center were shocked by the events. They described him as a reliable employee who created a positive atmosphere during Oklahoma City Thunder home games. No one noticed signs of stress or unusual behavior, even during his last shift at the playoff game. Jonathan's family released an official statement after the tragedy. "Our entire family has been left shattered and bewildered, with countless questions that we will never get answers to." Jonathan was the one whose jokes and cheerful character made everyone smile. Aside from these events, his children and wife were his entire life. Investigators, analyzing Jonathan's psychological state, noted typical signs characteristic of family killers. Dr. Joni Johnston noted that such crimes are often associated with a loss of control over the life situation. These men often see their families as an extension of themselves, as their property. When they feel they are losing control of the situation, it can lead to catastrophic consequences. The family's financial situation turned out to be more complicated than it initially seemed. In addition to consumer debts, unpaid medical bills and overdue mortgage payments were found. Working only part-time at the arena, Jonathan could hardly provide sufficient income for a family of 6. The Yukon community organized several memorial services to honor the memory of the deceased. In the schools where the boys studied, special places of remembrance were created. Ethan's sports team decided to dedicate the season to him, and Dylan's music group performed a special concert in his honor. The city's psychological service organized support groups for friends of the family and classmates of the deceased children. Such tragedies affect the entire community, psychologist Joanna Smith explained. It is especially difficult for children who have lost friends and are trying to understand how this could happen. Investigators continue to work on understanding the motives of the tragedy. Analysis of Jonathan's phone revealed numerous search queries about depression and financial problems, but no signs of planning the crime. This confirmed the theory about the impulsive nature of his actions. Particular attention was drawn to the fact that the life of the youngest son was preserved. Forensic psychologists suggest several possible explanations, from a sudden manifestation of parental feelings to an inability to harm the youngest child. This is a rare case in the practice of family murders, noted Dr. Johnston. Usually such criminals either kill the entire family or touch no one. The investigation also revealed that Jonathan had recently tried to find additional work. Numerous submitted resumes and correspondence regarding possible employment were found on his computer. This indicated his attempts to improve the financial situation, but obviously unsuccessful. The police found that the weapon used in the murders legally belonged to Jonathan. He purchased it several years ago for self-defense, and none of the family or friends expressed concern about its presence in the house. The tragedy of the Candy family forced the Yukon community to reconsider its attitude towards mental health, especially among men. Local health organizations launched a campaign to raise awareness about hidden depression and the importance of seeking help in a timely manner. Men are often ashamed to talk about their emotional problems, explained Dr. Joanna Smith. They can wear a mask of cheerfulness for years, hiding serious psychological problems. The case of Jonathan Candy shows how dangerous such hiding can be. School psychologists conducted a series of meetings with students and parents, discussing the importance of open dialogue about emotional problems. We must learn to recognize the warning signs, school counselor Mark Thompson emphasized. Often the people who are suffering the most are the ones who hide it best. The Yukon Police Department made changes to the protocols for responding to family conflicts. Even if there are no obvious signs of violence, we need to be more attentive to hidden problems, noted Police Captain Robert Hayes. The story of the Candy family shows that the absence of previous calls does not mean the absence of problems. The local church community organized weekly support meetings for men where they could openly talk about their problems and fears. "We must break the stereotype that seeking help is a sign of weakness," emphasized Pastor Michael Green. In fact, it is a manifestation of wisdom and responsibility. Special attention was paid to supporting the 10-year-old boy who remained the only surviving member of the family. His uncle, Brett Remarowski, became the official guardian. "Our main task is to ensure that he has the most normal childhood possible, despite the tragic circumstances," he shared with the press. The community continued to raise funds to support the boy. In addition to GoFundMe, local entrepreneurs organized a charity golf tournament, and schools held several charity fairs. "This money will ensure his future education and long-term psychological support," explained the fundraiser organizer. School friends of the deceased brothers created an online memorial where they shared memories and photographs. "We want the memory of Dylan, Ethan, and Lucas to live on," wrote Ethan's classmate, Cooper Armstrong. "They were wonderful friends and will forever remain in our hearts." The Candy family case became an important lesson for the entire community. It showed how serious problems can hide behind the facade of a perfect family, and how important it is to notice warning signs in a timely manner and not be ashamed to seek help. The tragedy highlighted the issue of hidden depression, particularly among men. Local mental health organizations began offering more resources and support for those struggling with emotional problems. They emphasized the importance of breaking the stigma around seeking help and encouraged open conversations about mental health. Schools implemented new programs to educate students about emotional well-being and to provide a safe space for them to discuss their concerns. Teachers and staff received additional training on recognizing signs of distress and intervening when necessary. The Yukon Police Department also re-evaluated their approach to domestic situations. They implemented new protocols for assessing the risk of violence, even in the absence of prior incidents. Officers received training on identifying subtle signs of abuse and providing resources to families in need. The community rallied around the surviving boy, ensuring that he had a strong support system. His school provided counseling services and worked closely with his guardian to monitor his emotional well-being. Local organizations set up a trust fund to cover his future educational and medical expenses. As time passed, the makeshift memorials for the Candy family were replaced with permanent ones. A bench in Dylan's name was placed outside the music room at Oklahoma Baptist University. Ethan's baseball team retired his jersey number and hung it in the dugout. Lucas's classmates planted a tree in his memory on the school grounds. The house on Czech Hall Road stood empty for months, a somber reminder of the tragedy that had occurred within its walls. Eventually, it was purchased by a young family who hoped to fill it with new memories and love. 1 year after the tragedy, the community gathered for a memorial service. They shared stories of the Candy family and reflected on the lessons learned. The surviving boy, now 11, spoke briefly, thanking everyone for their support and expressing his determination to honor his family's memory. In the years that followed, the boy grew into a resilient young man. He excelled in school and became an advocate for mental health awareness. He shared his story with others, hoping to inspire them to seek help and to break the cycle of silence. The Candy family tragedy served as a wake-up call for the entire community. It highlighted the importance of looking beyond the surface and offering support to those in need. It showed that even the most seemingly perfect families can struggle with hidden problems and that it is crucial to create a culture of openness and compassion. Though the pain of the loss would never fully heal, the community found strength in each other. They honored the memory of the Candy family by working to create a safer, more supportive environment for all. They hoped that by learning from this tragedy, they could prevent others from suffering the same fate. Years later, as the surviving boy graduated from college, he took a moment to reflect on his journey. He thought of his parents and siblings, and the love they had shared. He thought of the community that had rallied around him, providing strength when he needed it most. And he thought of the future, and the hope that he carried with him. As he stepped off the stage, diploma in hand, he knew that his family's legacy would live on through him. He was determined to make a difference in the world, to help others who were struggling, and to spread a message of hope and resilience. He knew that even in the darkest of times, there was always a reason to keep going, to keep fighting for a better tomorrow. The Candy family tragedy had left an indelible mark on the community of Yukon, Oklahoma. But it had also shown the incredible strength and compassion that could be found in the human spirit. It had shown that even in the face of unimaginable loss, there was always the potential for healing, for growth, and for hope. As the years passed, the story of the Candy family continued to be told, serving as a reminder of the importance of kindness, understanding, and support. It was a story of loss, but also one of resilience. It was a story that would never be forgotten, a story that would continue to inspire and to heal long after the last page had been turned.